Hello everyone. I'm hosting the eighth episode of Communication Talk organized by Communication Club, and I'm Tabassum Tari with you here. And today's our topic of discussion is publishing more of your scholarship on the importance of transparency in communication research. Yes, and we have our veteran scholars and our renowned teachers from across the world, and I'm going to introduce you with them. So then I'm introducing Dr. Nick Bowman, Associate Professor, College of Media and Communication, Texas Tech University, USA. Dr. Hemmady S. Mora, Chairperson, Department of Journalism, College of Communication, Polytechnic, University of Philippines. Dr. Bhasake Ambadas, Assistant Professor, Department of Mass Communication, PAH, Solapur University, India, and Rezaul Karim, Assistant Professor, Department of Communication and Journalism, Chittagong University, Bangladesh. Hello everyone, I hope you are doing very well and my cordial welcome to all of you. And we are gonna start our program today. Hello. Okay, as it is said that our today's topic is as it is said, our today's topic is publishing more of your scholarship on the importance of transparency in communication research. So our audience must know that what is actually said here. So I'm gonna give a brief description of this topic. Yeah, publishing more of your scholarship means that nowadays we are seeing that there are many thesis papers, research articles, and the students always try to give more and more information without any kind of recitation, proper recitations or referencing, and there are lack of referencing there. That's why many of the research papers are retracted. That is called retracted, yeah, papers. So these kind of problems are facing the universities all over the world, and we need to maintain our transparency for this problem, to face the problem, and how we can maintain the transparency in our communication research. That is the basic and core discussion of our today's program. So as it is said that I have said that plagiarism or the lack of referencing, proper recitation. So I want to know from Dr. Bowman that would you like to add your perspective in publishing more of your scholarship? Would you want to add something new here?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been working first, thank you for having me on the program today. And one of the things that I've been talking about with my colleagues and students here in North America, and also colleagues I worked with in Taiwan and Western Europe, is a conversation about more being the artifacts of research that we often don't publish. So most of us are quite familiar with publishing journal articles, book chapters, theses and dissertations, and you bring up some points about, proper citation and these issues. One of the things I want to add to the conversation is that as we go into a digital age where publication doesn't just have to be your manuscript anymore, publishing things like your data sets, your survey materials, your experimental stimulus materials, these go a long way in helping the reader understand sort of the nuts and bolts and the fundamentals of your study. Imagine for a moment, and I'm sure many of us on this call have had a scenario where you need to find survey items and you go to a study and they say, we use this survey. And nowhere in that paper do they actually give you the survey. And in fact, the only way that you can get those materials is by reaching out to that researcher, hoping they're still at that university or still at that email address, or hoping if it's an older paper, if they're even still around or still in the field. And one of our arguments is that we now are not restricted to just paper, right? We publish our research online. We publish our research in databases. Many of these databases are open access. They don't require any fees on our side. And so when I tell people to publish more, I want to see the actual elements of their study. Related to this is a discussion of credibility, which I think you bring up with citations and plagiarism. If someone's publishing their research and they're publishing their data and they're publishing their surveys and their interview guides and their code books, it's much easier for readers to have confidence in that research because we can see all the bits and pieces. So if I don't like an analysis and I think something could be done differently, I could actually analyze it as a reviewer. If I want to know how you interviewed your participants to arrive at the answers they gave in their surveys, I could actually read your interview guide. And while it might seem scary in the beginning, because many of us, it's going to make us vulnerable, right? Because we're publishing, many of us work inside gardens and we give people the fruits of our labor, but they don't actually see us in the garden working and cultivating and sowing seeds and doing that labor. I think in the long run, it's going to make us better scholars because we're going to have more confidence in the findings. We're going to have more access to the science that went into the science. And then ultimately, we're going to be able to teach each other. So when we're replicating and extending each other's research, we're not just taking for granted the words that are on the paper, but we can actually dive deeper into the constituent elements of this. This can be incredibly important when we talk about education, for example, and training students to learn how to do studies. So when I say publish more of your research, what I literally mean is more parts of any individual study, so that when that manuscript finally hits the big show and we can all read it, that manuscript also has with it all of these other elements of the science and of the scholarship that give a holistic interpretation and view of what exactly you did in your lab, or your however you define your research space. Not everybody works in labs, of course.
Thank you, Bowman. Okay, and now I think that our audience should know that what is plagiarism. And Rezaul Karim, would you please like to tell our audience that what is actually plagiarism? What Bowman already mentioned, that free access. Along with that, what is plagiarism in our communication research?
Thank you, Tori. Uh, Plagiarism, I think in there are so many. Thank you so much for inviting me in this program. Firstly, and and I know there is so many scholars here and respected scholars. I know they know much better than me. But now I'm explaining plagiarism. It means if you copy anything from any scholar without giving any reference, that means plagiarism. It's commonly we can say that, but in article, if you intentionally copy from page to page, and that's I think without any reference, and that should be you are accused to be an plagiarism.
Yeah.
And Tori,
No, I
did you
didn't
ask
ask anything
anything
else. Okay,
else?
thank you. Because many of the audience or many of the people don't even know that what is plagiarism, or plagiarism is a term that if we copy from any scholar's intellectual asset, so it is a very important thing to let our audience know. Okay, and the plagiarism, it hinders sometimes our communication research and the systems, and we must maintain our transparency in case of our communication. So we think that there must be some parameters of transparency, and mm, except plagiarism, I want to know from Dr. Hemmady S. Mora that what things are considered as the parameters of transparency in communication research.
Okay, hi. Thank you for inviting me to this talk. I'm glad that I'm a part of this talk, and we're all learning from each other. Okay, when I read about the topic and I saw the word transparency, well, when we publish our work, of course, it's our primary duty to make it clear to all. So all the facets and all the details of our research should be made known, and that is why we are publishing them for utilization. Because ultimately, the benefit of a research is for society to utilize it. Our society and whoever the target beneficiary of the research is should primarily benefit from such. So actually, for me, transparency is not really the big issue here, but it's about the utilization of the research and how you share this research in order for the research itself to reach the beneficiary. Okay, because it's like this. There are so many researches that are not being used. They are just in the libraries. They are accumulating dust in the libraries. So the number one focus should be, how can we make use of all these researches that are very, very useful to our society, because well, we call ourselves scholars and we publish researches and we get benefits from our universities, right? But what about the intended beneficiaries? Are they getting the results? Are they being utilized by the ones who should be using the results of the research? So I have decided that we should advocate not only the traditional routes to publishing researches, because there are unconventional routes in sharing our researches, such as what? Okay, like for example, I can share my research on podcasts for studies. Like, for example, I shared mine in the journalism studies podcast of Vienna and also in my country. So that is one unconventional type of publishing or sharing my research. Another is when I'm invited to speak in a forum or a convention, I get to share my research. Also, when I do webinar talks, I get to share my research. In social media blogs, you can share parts of your researches, right? Even in social media blogs, in your social media pages, it can be shared. It can also be shared in news article write-ups, and it can be cited in books and even in newspapers. So I am advocating for the sharing of our researches, not only in the traditional way, but also in unconventional ways, the unconventional route, so that society can eventually benefit from the results of our researches. Okay, so transparency is there, of course, it should be there, but at the same time, it should be available, made available to all.
Thank you,
Thank you for your.
Mora. Thank you very much. I think that you said a very good thing that our research, the scholars' research, should be available for the student or for the researcher who are doing the next research. For uh, Mora, will you please mute your mic, Mora?
Oh, I'm.
Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, you said a very good thing that we must give the free access of the research to our researcher for their next research, and it is very important uh, to get the accessibility of the research, and we must use it in a different ways, and we must be benefited by those research. And I think that Nick Bowman would like to add something on this point. Please, Nick Bowman, would you please add something here?
Oh, sure. I just wanted to say that your comments couldn't be any more accurate. In fact, I raised my attention because on Saturday I gave a speech to the New York State Communication Association in the U.S., and we had this very conversation. And it was, openness is great, but if we're only being open to each other, it doesn't really move the needle in terms of being public advocates or reaching out to audiences or reaching out beyond the ivory tower or beyond scholarly realms. And one of the things that was brought up to your points about reaching out beyond academia is that sometimes opening up provides people with different ways to contact or integrate into a study. So, as the general public or as science communicators or journalists get a manuscript, they don't often do much with that. But if they can get a manuscript that also has all these other elements to it, whether it's, tables and figures, or whether it's, video narratives, or whether it's other types of elements that are attached to the paper, it starts to invite them to the study. And to give a very short example of this, I recently completed a research project looking at how video game players form a sense of place and an emotional connection to the digital environments. And after we published the study, in the manuscript online, the publisher made an interactive map where they took players' images from the game and map them onto a state, West Virginia in the United States, we had a lot of emails from gamers who read the research and shared their stories with us. And I have to think that wasn't because they liked the regression model or because they liked the theory, right? They saw a fragment of that paper that was accessible to them, these images, these graphics, these interactives, that I think did exactly what you're talking about, is that it opened up the science to a group of people who otherwise would have been totally lost. Part of that was open access publishing. Part of that was sharing data and images. And part of that, and I love your point, was keeping in mind that the audiences for our work don't just have to be each other. And I love the point you just made. I just wanted to reiterate that not 2 days ago, this conversation came up with a group of a couple hundred people. So thank you for that very much.
Thank you, Bowman, for your valuable speech. And okay, both of you, Bowman and Dr. Mora, both of you mentioned that the free access of our research papers, thus the researcher will be benefited. But I want to know that if there are free access, then a question generally comes, that the credibility questions of those research papers. And you also mentioned, Dr. Mora, that we can publish it through podcast, through forum and social blogs, right? Social blogs. Then if we publish our research, maybe a researcher publishing their research by doing hard work, but how can that would be considered as credible? How will that be considered as credible? Dr. Mora, would you please clear it?
Yeah, the platform should also be credible. You don't just publish anywhere. You don't just use any social media sites. It has to be identified with a group that is credible also. So, like for example, there is this in my country, we have this Facebook page, Journalism Studies. So we can share our researches. Journalism Studies Association in the Philippines. So we publish in this Facebook site our studies. We exchange. We try to exchange and we try to collaborate. If there is a possibility of collaborating or exploring deeper a specific study, then we talk to each other, and then we also involve students. Sometimes it's a collaboration among faculty. Sometimes it's a collaboration among faculty and students. Okay, so be careful also in choosing the platform where you publish your research. Of course, you need to preserve the integrity of your research by choosing the right platforms. Tahura,
Yes,
yeah.
that's a very important point, that we must choose our platforms very carefully, because I think that there are many platforms, because it is the era of ICT and there are many platforms in all over the world and in the internet also. So the students and the researcher can find information and get free access to it, and they need not feel that. They need not feel the necessity to give proper recitation or proper referencing there. So I want to ask to Dr. Bowman, that what kind of measurements should be taken in maintaining transparency in communication research?
So the nice thing about this is the most important thing you can do is provide the links, literally provide the access. So there's a misconception, and it goes with the current conversation about what is credible and uncredible. It's finding platforms where you can host your materials to where those platforms themselves are credible. So in the United States, many university libraries have research repositories that are funded, so they're free to anybody, and those tend to have a credibility with them. So if someone were to go to Texas Tech University's library, they could download data from my projects. Of course, the drawback there is it assumes you're affiliated with the university. Other platforms that are more agnostic include things like the Open Science Framework, OSF, or GitHub, GITHUB. And these are sort of nation agnostic, politically agnostic web pages that are maintained as third-party servers. The most important thing is having a stable and reliable URL. The OSF, the Open Science Framework, provides DOIs, the digital object identifiers, so they become citable references for the future. So I could provide you a data set, and that data set is actually citable. And then, of course, like the currency of science, citation, right? The more people who cite those references, and as that becomes more commonplace, that sort of becomes a de facto marker. So for me, it's really about finding the established, credible, or ability to be credible repository for these things. I wouldn't host things in a personal blog that are like data sets because they might disappear, right? You might want to find an organization that can host it for you so that 50 years from now, it's still accessible. So to me, that's key. And then with that, and going off the previous answer, once you've established those agnostic points of hosting and sharing your materials, then whether it's a journal or a blog or a newspaper article or a magazine article, you just use the same citations. And so all of those things form a network by which these informal science communications get linked back to a formal credibility standpoint. And then as long as you're sharing the right materials, everything works out. The final thing to add is that when you're sharing materials, whether it's data or surveys or code books, the trick is making sure they're accessible. So for example, if you share SPSS files, you're making an assumption that everybody in the world has SPSS to analyze data, and they might not. So you have to think about a platform agnostic files. If you're sharing sound files or video files, you may consider sharing multiple versions of them or finding versions that are more widely applicable. PDFs are usually better than Word files because PDFs can be opened anywhere. And those are all considerations I can talk about later, but you have to remember that your audience doesn't necessarily have the access you do. The biggest mistake I've seen is folks taking their computer file, dumping it online, but they're not realizing that the people who are opening this file can't open half the files you've given them, which kind of defeats the purpose of sharing. So unfortunately, there is an added labor cost here. But I think the benefits are outweighing the costs when it comes to agnostic platform spaces that are credible being shared through informal spaces that kind of create a science network around the sharing.
Thank you very much for adding here. And I think that, yeah, you said a very good thing that we must provide the links, the library research, and the open science frame, as you mentioned. So these all things, I think that these all things can be the measurements to maintain the transparency in communication research. Yeah. So now, Rezaul Karim, would you like to add something here that how what kind of measurement should be taken in maintaining the transparency?
Actually, I want to add, discuss about 2 points: credibility and accessibility. Right? As we discussed, accessible. If young researcher want to publish his or her article in an open access journal, you have to pay. I know everything. Everyone know that. If you want to publish your article, you have to pay for that. So I think it's so tough for a young researcher. They are actually they face a lot of problem to raise fund for their research or article, but if they have to pay 1,000 or 1,500 for publishing open access journal, that's a big problem for them. And again, another problem is you can check credibility. That you can check index number. By index number, we can check it's if it's a good index number, then it's more much more credible. I think, and that's the point. So we can easily check this.
Yeah, that's a very important point that this young researcher must pay, and yeah, if they have to, they pay, and then they will obviously publish something credible, and the transparency would be maintained. But now I want to know from you, Rezaul Karim, that we know that there are many technologies all over the world that we are using to detect plagiarism. And do you think that this kind of technology is useful, or do we need more and more technologies to stop or prevent plagiarism in our research, communication research sector?
Thank you, Tori. Actually, it would be a very good initiative. I think in every research article we can use plagiarism checking software. I think right now it's nicely enough to detect plagiarism, but article written in native language may not work properly. But I think technology with artificial intelligence could be more informative and resourceful to maintain plagiarism or checking plagiarism in any article. Are you hearing me? Am I audible?
No, we can't. No, we can't hear you. Would you please repeat? I think there is network issues. We can't hear you. Hello.
Yes. Your question was how can you use our technological tools? Okay, Tori, yes,
Yeah.
it will be very good initiative. In every research article, we can use our plagiarism checking software. There are so many plagiarism checking software. So I think right now it's nicely enough to detect plagiarism in any article. But there is a problem. If any article written in their native language, but this software may not work properly. But uh,
That's
technology with artificial intelligence could be more informative and resourceful for checking plagiarism. Is that okay?
I think there is some network issues. Sometimes we are missing your voice. Yeah.
Okay, then
Hello. Can
I
you
will
hear
repeat.
me?
Okay, you can continue with
Can,
others. I will repeat again next
Okay,
time.
thank you.
Hello.
You said a very good thing that if we use our technologies, we know that it is all the softwares are made to detect the English language. But if we do our research in native language, then we don't have a proper or we don't have a sufficient softwares to detect those plagiarism in our native language. But yeah, Bowman already said that it's a what is that? Yeah, test software is a good start, but it's not the end. Yeah, it is working, but not in our countries, but not in other countries of the world. So it is a very it's a very alarming thing that in this ICT, in this era of ICT, we are still not sufficient or enriched in this kind of software. So, and you said that the predatory platforms should be avoided. But I want to know that if the researcher, if the students don't get enough platforms, those who are making their research, who are doing their research in their native languages, then where they will publish their research? Because it is very challenging and it is very struggling to publish our research in a renowned journal, in a renowned forum, in a renowned podcast. Then what will the students will do who are publishing, who are doing their research in their native language? Yeah, Dr. Bowman, I want to know this from you.
Yeah, so I speak about this as an editor, an incoming editor of an index journal. And it's a common fear that my colleagues have, especially colleagues that are writing in English as a second language, because whether for various reasons, English becomes the default language for a lot of social science. One of the things I have encouraged authors to do who are coming at this internationally and are worried about these conventions, reach out to those editors. We have a really bad culture in academia where we seem to think that editors are on a pedestal and they are not to be bothered. And we don't encourage people to reach out to those editors. And perhaps at one time that was true, that editors were meant to be left alone. I don't want to bug them. I don't want to bother them. But I get the suspicion that at least in this field of communication, those tides are changing. And so the first thing I would tell any young scholar is that the worst thing an editor will do is ignore your email. And then if they do ignore your email, frankly, that might say something about the journal. I mean, if they're not willing to respond to one email asking a question, there are other journals out there. And as COM gets larger, our index factors get larger and more of our journals that are indexed are there. But it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to reach out. Or maybe if it's not an editor, reach out to an associate editor. I think people would be surprised at how much feedback they get in terms of convention, in terms of standards. I think it's really critical that we start those conversations. Ideally, the editors would be reaching out to other scholars. And in fact, at one journal I work with, we're already talking about ways in which we can work with different communities and reach out and kind of explain how our journal works, how it might break from your conventions, why that's okay. But I'm strongly a fan of encouraging scholars to break that mold, send that first email, and just ask those questions. And there's a way to do that earnestly where you're not taking up too much time. Try to consolidate it into a single request. Don't sell your paper. That's a bad thing. But ask questions about how this journal fits. And so I think it's okay to share an abstract. I wouldn't share anything past that. And you could ask basically two questions. does this type of scholarship roughly fit your scope? But also if the person has any tips or tricks about ways in which the manuscript can be structured. I know it sounds like simple advice, but I'm shocked at how few emails I get from authors. I would probably say I get one a month, and that's far too little for a journal that gets 400 submissions a year. We shouldn't leave the quiet part unspoken. It's okay to ask that question. And it's not a sign of vulnerability if you ask, especially coming from, the United States, where we are having authentic conversations about diversity and inclusion. It is on our minds right now. So it's okay to ask those questions. And I wish that more scholars would feel comfortable doing that. Just send that one note.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. I think that Dr. Bhasake is not with us, but the next question was to him. But okay, I want to ask Dr. Mora, that that our university, there are many universities in our country and research organization in our countries. Then, do you think that the universities and the research organization can keep their contribution in maintaining the transparency or preventing plagiarism in our countries?
Okay. Yeah, first and foremost, I would agree that avoiding predatory journals is really very important. The problem is when students do researching, our students, they could not distinguish between a predatory journal and which is doing the right thing. We tell them about, okay, try accessing ISI Scopus Index journals here in the Philippines, because they are the ones that are not considered predatory and are publishing highly credible researches. Predatory journals would just accept money, and they're not very particular about the research. If you pay, you get published. So what about the quality of the research? They're not much into it. So when the students access these types of researches, they get the output of their researching from these researches is also not good. So in our country, what we do is our Commission on Higher Education lists specific journals that are credible. So the students are given the lists. Okay, you can choose from this, and so forth and so on. So there is a site in our country where the students would be able to locate the journals that are credible, the ones that are not predatory. So we guide them in doing that. Okay, and then when it comes to, well, usually plagiarism is also really a problem. Here in the Philippines, we use Turnitin, but I believe that it varies from one country to another, but we're comfortable with Turnitin. Okay, so we also tell our students to be very careful when it comes to doing researches, because citations is also very important, and they should. It's always okay to get ideas from other researches, but you should be very particular with the difference and the uniqueness of your research. Okay, you have to be able to stress how unique your research is from a related study, because some students get their studies from other related studies, but the problem is some students are just changing very minimal minute details. Okay, so they have to be able to justify, okay, the difference in the uniqueness of your research from another's research. Like, for example, everything is there, they just change the respondent. For example, only the respondent is different. Well, we accept that, but it has to be justified very well. Would the change of respondents really make your research significant? Okay, so some would say, no, with this is just a copy. This is copied from another research. And the students would say, no, our respondents are different. Okay, so how do you draw the line then? Okay, we ask our students to defend. Okay, how does your study become unique by changing the respondents only? So it depends on how they would justify. Okay, because if there really is a very significant aspect in the change of respondent while retaining all the aspects of the study of another author, then we tell the students this is okay, because this will yield very significant and fruitful and unique results, although you used ideas from a related study. So it depends also, of course, as the researchers defend their or justify their reasons for such. Okay, Tahura, I think I explained myself.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mora. Yeah, I think that Dr. Vasek, you're facing very terrible problem with internet. Okay, my next question is to you. That we eagerly want to know from you that we are living in Asian subcontinent, and uh, Rezaul Karim and Dr. Mora, please mute your mic.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. It's okay. So we know that in regional language, if we do any kind of research, you said that Dr. Vasak that it is very complex thing. So do you think that our educational system is responsible for this kind of problem, like for plagiarism? Or suppose it is seems in different countries that if research is done in English language, then what does the students do? They just copy that English and translate it to their native language, and then they submit it sometimes, and we cannot detect the plagiarism there. So do you think that our educational system is responsible here? Dr. Vasek, can you hear
Hello.
me? Hello. Yeah, Dr. Vasek,
Actually,
we can hear you.
Yeah. Actually, what I said in chat box, the goal of research is what? The goal of research is to improve the level of society. Every research is a scientific thinking. There is no discrimination between the research. Regional research is lower than the what do I call multinational cities are doing well. There is no discrimination between the research. Research is the scientific thinking, but we have to think about that. What is we are giving to the society as a unique? That is the important thing. Result output for the society, output for the human beings is the important. Even academician means plagiarism is the academic chaos, but those people are not educated. They are also
We are extremely sorry. I think that we lost our connection with Mr. Vasek. Okay, then I think we should move on. Dr. Rezaul Karim, I want to know from you that we know that plagiarism is all over the country or all across the world, and it is hindering our communication research. So I want to know that how the communication system or research system would be affected if there is no transparency, if the researcher don't maintain any transparency there.
Uh, Actually, it's a serious problem. If you cannot maintain any transparency in our research, then there will be a bad competition. How more we can publish our article, and plagiarism will
Can you hear me?
increase.
Yeah, Dr. Vasek, we can hear you. Would you like to continue?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Dr. Vasek, we can hear you. Would you like to continue? Dr. Vasek, can you hear me? Dr. Vasek, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah, I think you
May I
should
continue?
continue. Yeah,
Yeah.
you should. Rezaul Karim, I'm sorry, we are coming to you after that. Yeah.
Actually, the research finding, the output, final output is important. The way is not important. Actually, we are doing research in a scientific way for the sake of we cannot.
We lost our connection again. Okay, Rezaul Karim, will you continue?
Okay,
Though it's getting messed up,
what
I know, but please, I'm sorry. I'm extremely sorry for this.
it's okay. Actually, what I'm saying, there will be a bad competition. How more article can I publish if there is no restriction, there is no transparency, if there is no gatekeeping? And actually, in our country and also so many countries, article related to our promotion, it helps us to promote that for our promotion. So everyone will try to publish so-called article and try to get promotion with this. But actually, what is the main purpose of this article? What we are writing article, what we are doing research to create knowledge. Actually, sometime few moments ago, Hemmady already said for our humankind, for our development, for the to help our society, which article will be helpful for our society, right? So if we can't create knowledge with our article, we cannot find our true things. So I think it will be useless article, and there will be no this article will not create any change in our society or in our country also. And that will be ultimate failure of our research, and that's the point.
Thank you very much, Rezaul Karim. I want to know from Dr. Bowman that is there any way to create the awareness among the academia to maintain this transparency to prevent this plagiarism to be happened?
So in many ways, first I loved that Rezaul was comfortable saying useless research, and I think sometimes as academics we have to be comfortable saying that. We have to be okay rejecting things, not just anonymously as reviewers, but openly. And I don't mean to attack each other as scholars, but in some ways, things that don't get cited fall away. If you think about science as a marketplace of ideas, and we all generate our own best explanations of things, well, invariably, there are studies that never get any attention. And there could be lots of reasons for that. But one important reason is that they're not any good. And I think sometimes we talk around that a little bit. And diversity and inclusion in science doesn't just mean everyone gets to play. It means everyone should have an opportunity to be part of the system. But if you are going to engage in plagiarism and non-transparency, your research is going to fall below most standard agreeable markers, to which it may be rendered useless. And it sounds like a rude thing to say, but I think it's an important term to remember. Sometimes we fight over the scraps of one or two papers that might have one or two small problems with them, and then as a result, we miss the obvious things because we're not paying attention to the stuff that's not very good. But your question, so I love the comment. Thank you for that. Your question about what can we do systematically, I think there's two levels. One of those levels is going to sound very philosophical, but it's reminding ourselves of the norms of science. So I'm looking at this call, and we all come from very different regions of the world, but we all are using very similar language. That science is meant to be universal. None of us own it, right? It's meant to be part of the human condition. Science is about communality, and in some ways, while none of us own our knowledge, all of us own our findings. We should be able to readily exchange ideas from one area to the next without barriers. Science should be disinterested, that we're not motivated by sort of perverse or ulterior motives, because you might get a job with bad science once. It won't happen twice. And nothing hurts more than falling down after getting up there through dubious means. But most importantly, science should be skeptical. We're inherently skeptical. We don't prove anything. We're always setting out with the best explanation. And those are borrowed from Merton and his scientific norms. And I think it's important that we think about science in terms of certified knowledge, being knowledge that is independent of me. And really, it's independent of anybody on the call, but it's certifiable for all of us. If we can remind ourselves of that, we might be more comfortable establishing criteria that are more objective for what does certified knowledge mean. Journals might start either encouraging or requiring things to be shared as a precondition for something being published. We see this with some grants already, with a lot of government grants, that if you don't agree to share your data, they won't give you money, right? So there are things we can do sort of top down that are maybe even a bit authoritarian, but at least they establish a baseline. Or what might be more preferable is our culture shifts to where we start appreciating more that when a researcher does make their information available, when they pass a plagiarism check, when they share their materials, share their data, we don't punish them for not doing it, but we reward them for doing it. Whether it's putting a badge on the manuscript, maybe the journal highlights those articles, maybe in hiring committees or thesis defenses, we give rewards for these things. And so I think we have to kind of make a decision about do we value those processes as part of certified knowledge? And then do we do it as a top-down mechanism or as a bottom-up mechanism? Or what will likely happen is something in the middle. I think this, think back 80 years, if you were doing statistical analyses and communication, percentages were fine because that was the norm of the time. 2020, that wouldn't get you in the front door of a journal. You'd have to go much further than that. You'd have to do your t-test with your effect sizes, with your script. And maybe in 10 years, that won't be enough. And you may have to give your analysis script and your data. And that might just be where we go. And that will also be a way that we prevent some of these issues of certification and transparency because we shift our norms of practice. So I say all that to suggest that we also don't have to wait, because if we just do it now, and the more of us who do it, the more normative it becomes, to where if you're not willing to engage in these extra steps, there may have to be a reconciliation down the road as to whether or not the scholarship that you do tomorrow would be certified, whereas the scholarship that you did yesterday was certified. And that goes for my own career. Maybe there are papers that I published 10 years ago that wouldn't get published today. That's also a good thing. That's how science progresses. It's just harder, but all of us are engaging in the audacity to explain human behavior. It should be hard. And so I think all of these practices help move us towards that needle. And to get at some of the other commentators on the call already, making sure that we're advancing the human condition and not just advancing careers.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. Thank you very much for your valuable comments. Our program's time is running out, so I'm just asking my last question to to Rezaul Karim. That do you think that our educating our scholars in ICT will help us to prevent these kind of things, to prevent plagiarism, or to maintain the transparency? Educating our scholars, will it help us?
Thank you, Tony. Actually, it depends. You are doing it intentionally or unintentionally. Plagiarism software is available in everywhere. So if you want to check your article, then you can put in plagiarism software. Then you can check it, how the percentage of reference, how many percent you have copied from other source. Then if you're sure that you are copying more than 20%, you can recheck your article, or you can reshuffle that. But if you do it intentionally, there is actually nothing to do, because you know what you are going to do. So actually, ethically, we have to more. Actually, we need it. You have to maintain ethics. You have to deserve. You have to maintain ethics, and you have to keep it in your mind. That's the. I think there's a best practice to avoid plagiarism. And there's another way. In our institution, we can train up our faculties, researchers. So we can train them to make them more confident to write any research article or something like that, or proposal, or about writing project proposal, and so that. Thank you, Tori.
Thank you, Rezaul Karim. I think that we are at the very end of our program, and today's discussion, though there were some technological issues, but it was very exciting and very interesting. I think that our audience could learn a lot from all of you, from veterans like you. And yeah, if we just sum up our today's discussion, then we find that what is plagiarism, why it is happening, and how we can create the awareness among the people. And yeah, we must avoid our predatory sites and yeah, platforms for publishing the research paper, and we must use our research, our scholars intellectual assets to develop, to improve the society, to improve our living society. And yeah, we must know how to utilize our research, and we must know where to publish our research, where to publish our intellectual asset. And yeah, when we are using others' intellectual asset, others' scholarships, then we must give them proper acknowledgement. We must give them proper recitation and referencing. And I think thus we can prevent our today's problem what we are facing in our country and across the world. There are many technological innovation is going on, and I think that if we try to accept those innovation, then we in our country, in every country, can stop this and prevent this. Thank you very much, Dr. Bowman, Rezaul Karim, and Dr. Hemmady S. Mora. Thank you very much for being with us. I hope you guys will do very well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karim. And thank you.
Thank you, Tari.
Hemmady.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you, Professor Bowman
Nice to meet you.
and Karim.